Okay, you're on.
Am I audible? Do I sound like you can hear me clearly?
Why can't you see me?
I can't see you too well, but I can hear you.
Wave your hand. Yes, I see you move. I see you move. It worked.
Yay!
Nobody moved. Nobody moved from wherever they are. Everybody, all of you are in the right place.
The United Nations 2017 revision of the world's population prospects estimates the current population of this world to be at about 7.6 billion people, and it's expected to jump to 8.6 billion by 2030, and is expected to move up to 9.8 billion by 2050. While there is an increase in life expectancy and people are living longer, there is also the problem of having at least twice the amount of the world population to be above the age of 60 by the time we hit 2050. While healthcare costs and reduced productivity with diseases like cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory disease, diabetes, and cancer stemming from excessive alcohol use, tobacco use, poor diet, and lack of physical activity drives millions of people into poverty, it is estimated by the World Bank that about 60 million people will be pushed to extreme poverty, and only simply because of COVID-19. And while it calls for major changes in our healthcare systems, it also calls for a change in attitude for the people who will suffer the most from this. This is take 18, no, so I'm so sorry, this is take 19 of Stories with Shastri. And I have closer to home, I have a story of a friend of India who was diagnosed at the age of 15 with diabetes, and he took charge of that situation and he started A Diabetic Chef. And I'm just going to add him on so we can talk to him about millennial health and all the things that we can do about it.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm very good. I've been reading on the health of millennials and a lot of stats that came along. And since you're an economics student, I think it will really help me.
Mm-hmm. So
So,
the
sorry?
so the statistics that a lot of these organizations present to us, right?
Right.
They might be greatly skewed because of their sample sizes, and they're very restricted to urban youth.
Right.
So they miss out on a chunk of population of the rural youth, and there's this inherent uh, assumption that is made. Like even when we are doing economic models, when we are constructing models, this is what happens. So especially in countries like India, where the urban rural youth population is quite imbalanced
Yeah.
because of multiple reasons, it's very oddly assumed that it might be like in the same line of regression. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I was just listening to what you were saying, and it was quite interesting.
Yeah, there was this study that was done by this insurance company called, I think, Sigma KKT. And they did a study in India, they did one in the UK, and they did one in the US, and Germany, France, and Brazil. And that survey that they conducted says that Indian millennials, 95% of the Indian millennials that they surveyed have accepted to be stressed, which means that we are the most stressed millennial population in the world. So why do you think we're like that?
It's because of the social conditioning that we live in with. It's because of how we are expected to be in a certain way. It's because we are told that we need to perform in our studies, we need to perform in our careers, we're told that we need to perform in our relationships in a certain way. And there's this whole setting that has been drawn around us that if you don't live up to XYZ, then you have failed. Because the system of grading is so inherently rooted in us since we were children that you have to be an A, you have to be like A plus, you have to be an O in everything you do, which is why that brings us that point of stress that if I am not getting XYZ promotions within 10 and 12 months of my job, that means I'm
Yeah,
a B or a C or I've failed. If my
yeah,
relationship is not going as planned, that means I've failed. So these inhibitions and these little failures that come around us, they're in totality causing this whole factor of stress.
Hmm.
The second thing that comes in, apart from just society, is our own households. Like our parents have told us that you have to function and perform in a certain way, and any deviation from that path means wronging to what they have
Yeah.
said and what is actually supposed to be done. So
Right.
this whole lot sort of comes in to play with stress, and the last part would be a whole factor of self-loathing, how you have watched things around you and how you want to be a
Yeah.
certain way. For
Yeah.
instance, someone who is overweight would want to be extremely thin, someone who's thin would want to gain some weight, someone who's
Yeah.
in their mid-weight would want to be muscular, someone who's too muscular would want to be lean, someone who's too lean wants to be muscular. And in all this whole wide spectrum of this expectancy of being a certain way, we forget that we're just burdening ourselves with a lot of stress.
So, we're like we were, talking about this yesterday. We're a generation that prefers going to work or working over our sleep cycles, and that is something that proves detrimental to our health in the long run, and it causes burnout, it causes hypertension, and also is a major cause for depression and anxiety, and invariably heart disease at a certain age. So, what do you think contributes to that sense of, the constant fear of panic that, you have to finish your work and you have to lose out on your sleep?
Um, See, there's this inherent sense of replaceability that we have in India. That
Yeah.
if you don't do the job, someone will do it and you'll be replaced. So, at that sense
Yeah, the
of,
responsibility factor.
yeah, so the fact of replaceability is so important that if I'm unable to do a certain task, then I'll be replaced for it, which is why I would rather skip my sleep and do the job than be replaced tomorrow. On an independent level, on a freelance basis, or on an employability like basis, where like uh, I have friends who work at like very very large scale MNCs, and they are told every day in their HR meetings that if y'all don't perform now, we'll replace you. We've just sacked 500 people, 1,000 people. So this
Yeah.
whole idea of replaceability and this job insecurity, which does not exist quite around everywhere that we look at, especially in the Western cultures where Saturdays and Sundays are an off, and you cannot email your employees post at 10 p.m. But in India, there's this scary factor that Sunday को अगर email आया तो reply करना ही है. You have to reply to the email that comes to you and submit a report even on a weekend because you might be replaced tomorrow. That is one part of it. Second is this whole idea of I need to prove myself.
Right.
If you're trying to prove yourself to someone who is judging you by the way you perform and not judging you by your work, if you know what I'm saying, like the quality
Yeah.
versus like the delivery of time is this whole important factor that plays in, and it really takes a toll on your health for most of us. Like, you know how I function as well. Like, I'll be a hypocrite if I detest the fact that you can't sort of work in certain timelines, you need to sleep on certain timelines. Um, I do stretches of 15 and 16 hours of work as well. My reasons are
Yeah.
quite similar. Not just about replacement, but because of this whole crunch of time I have right now, because of the situation. So a lot of this is
Yeah.
also situational. Um, you can't do away with work, but you can probably like better it out by some form of like activity, or you can better it out with a better eating habit, or just gapping your caffeine intake. Like, you won't believe it, from whenever we've known each other, it's probably been 4 5 years, but
Yeah.
I've been off caffeine for 6 months.
Wow.
Like, no coffee, like
I
no direct
need
caffeine.
coffee as soon as I wake up.
Exactly. So I've legit woken up and had half a mango. So I'm trying to balance out a lot of toxins. Like, I've reduced smoking. I've reduced the intake of a lot of uh, toxins in my body as much as possible.
Right.
So if I am affecting my sleep cycle, I would probably want to balance it by doing Zumba the same day, or so that I get more sound sleep. The term sleep like a baby comes in play. Or
Yeah,
I
it
would like to
does.
dance, or I'd like to uh, do some pranayam, or I'd like to do some form of yoga or some exercise that will help me uh, balance it out with my sleep cycle and also help with my health factor.
Right. Tell me a little more about being off caffeine. What's that like?
So my anxiety has never. So of course my anxiety is pretty bad in general. I've been on medication for the last 2.5 since 2018. So about roughly 2 years I've been on meds like SSRIs and like a bunch of different drugs. So being off caffeine was a conscious decision because I felt like this heartburn and this rush I used to have after having coffee. Okay. And this was temporary. It was like a rush I would have for at least an hour and a half or two, where I'd just feel anxious, like trembling, and then all the different symptoms of anxiety. And this was purely caffeine driven.
Hmm.
You know how people decide to stop certain things just like that.
Yeah.
The maximum caffeine I would have like had would have been like a sip of latte. And latte is supposed to be warm milk, literally,
Right.
with like a hint of hazelnut or like a hint of coffee. But like that's
Yeah.
literally like a sip of it I would have had probably 4 months, 5 months back, because like we're sitting in a setup and like probably a hot chocolate is being passed around and like a group of friends or whatever, colleagues. Being off caffeine has actually helped me improve my sleep cycle.
Okay.
Like, I have noticed that I sleep much longer when I'm not having any caffeine in my body, because
Hmm.
any substance to leave your body takes a certain amount of time. So
Yeah.
from sleeping 4 to 5 hours, I now sleep for 7 to 8 hours.
Wow.
So that is one of the things. Also, I've not consumed meat at the same time for the last 3 months. So probably all of this is factoring in together.
Right.
But I guess caffeine was like one thing I could not resist. Like I used to have 5 espressos a day, like easy five
Yeah.
espressos, like
I remember when I was in a setup where I was working outside, I would always be driven by any amount of coffee, and it's at a point where I know that I feel like I'm immune to it because nothing. I can still sleep like a baby even if I have
exactly,
coffee,
exactly.
which I know that. So, do you think that our generation or that do you think we take health seriously?
Um, unless it gets really bad, we don't.
Right.
So
Right.
I was obese while growing up. I was unhealthy, and I would not take things seriously at all. Okay, unless I got until I got detected with diabetes.
Right.
Until the big D came to me and like shook me up and said like, "Hey, bro, you're gonna die. They'll chop your feet off and they'll do this and that to you.
Yeah.
But you gotta stop. You gotta draw the line." Similarly, I have friends with thyroid and I have friends with like multiple health conditions who don't take care of themselves on a very regular basis. But when that uh, fact comes in, that when the doctor gives that report out, like, hey, listen, this is the problem with you, is when you start taking care. So we're a very scared youth. We're not a very
Yeah.
preventive, let's take care of ourselves kind of people.
Right.
The ones who go to the gym have gone there for an external facade, and the ones who are taking care of their health are a part of a cult. And there's a very minuscule number of people who are actually taking care of themselves. The rest of us are
Yeah.
just living in our bubbles until the
Yeah.
doctor has bursted the bubble and told us, hey, listen, boss, this is problematic and
Speaking
you
of,
are in problem.
but speaking of having your bubble bursted, what was it like for you at the age of 15 to be told that you're diabetic?
Um, I mean, now that I look back, I find it funny, but in a very literal sense, मेरे पैरों के नीचे से दुनिया फिसल गई थी. I had lost myself completely.
Right.
I had no track of time. I had no track of people. I didn't know what was happening anymore. Because you have this sense of a very heavy heart and you're numb. Like you just don't know what's going on around you. And you're just sitting with like a sheet of paper and you're just shivering and looking at it and you just don't know what's going on. Because you don't know what these numbers mean to you.
Yeah.
So then you go to the doctor and then you present to the doctor and the doctor says, Acha beta suno, these are the issues. And doctors are one of the most unfiltered people you'll ever meet in your life. They're the last people who'll console you, which is great. But it's
Yeah, it
also
works.
like it's also a little scary कि like he'll just be like अच्छा बेटा तुम्हें diabetes है तुम्हें ये है तुम्हें वो है and बेटा भी नहीं they'll just be like oh you have this you have that you have this you have that so these are the medicines you need to take get out of here. So by the time you've absorbed it and processed the whole thing that you are diabetic, it's time for you to have reached home. Like this whole
Right.
journey has gone through, and now you let it sink in. So for the next time you pick up anything to eat and you're about to put it in your mouth, you're just like, oh shit, I am diabetic. Am I supposed to eat this? Then you put it back
Right.
down. And then
So there
you
was a
pick
lot.
up.
Sorry.
No, please continue.
No. So there was a lot of reconfiguration that you went through, right?
Yeah, completely. Like, imagine cutting out all forms of sugar from your body for 2 years, including natural sugar, fruits, and everything you can imagine.
I can do that. My mom doesn't. We don't have sugar in my house. I checked my entire pantry. There's no sugar. I
No.
naturally don't pick.
So this includes chips, this includes fried food, this includes fast food, this includes a lot of what we consume in normal times. This includes fat milk. This includes what else? I feel like I'm cheating on my diabetes also. You can't eat Maggie. You can't eat white sauce. You can't have maida. You can't have a lot of butter. So a lot of these things just come in and crash in front of you, like right in front of you, because you're like, hey, listen, everything's out of order and your body's not functional. So then there's this whole rule set that comes to you.
Right.
Okay, so you have to follow A with B with C and D and E. And I was school going that time.
Yeah.
So imagine going to school, watching other kids eat certain things, but quietly refusing to things even if you're offered. And eating in the canteen was a big no for me because I could not eat anything of the canteen.
But did you tell people that your friends that you were diabetic, or did you face any kind of discrimination amongst your peers for being diabetic? Did that ever happen?
I'll tell you a little funny story. So
Yeah.
my parents told me not to tell anyone that I'm diabetic. Okay. And this is something that I've spoken about in one of my recent talks also. I think it's like my oldest YouTube video that I have put up about how this child who didn't tell her teachers and her students about her diabetes condition, she ended up getting sick because she didn't tell anybody, and then eventually uh, she passed in school because she slipped into a coma and things got really bad, and nobody knew what to do because she didn't tell anyone about her insulin intake, etc. So essentially, what happens is that our parents have conditioned us to not tell people about our medical condition because of discrimination. But they forget that sometimes, and most of the times, they're not with us. There will be medical emergencies, God forbid, there might be things that happen that will require you to be assisted, that will require you to be helped in a certain way or the other. You will have to be taken care of when your parents are not around. And what if someone doesn't know what's going on with you?
Yeah.
If you are a hypoglycemic person, when your blood sugar has dropped a lot and people think you're having an epileptic attack because it looks the same. Like in a hypoglycemic incident, my eyes roll up, I go blanked out and I fall straight on my face. And like I'm just trembling and this looks like a seizure, and I'm not even joking. You can't tell the difference until you know, which is why there are a lot of times when you wear a bracelet for type 1 diabetics, you wear like a chain which says T1D, or it has a symbol that says you need insulin, and like that thing that just talks about it. Okay.
Right.
So
Even I
for
didn't know
me,
about this.
yeah, so there are bands. It's called the Diabetic Band.
No, I'm talking about the it looking like an epileptic seizure. I
Yeah.
had no idea about that.
I mean, it looks really, you can't tell the difference until you know. So, which is why
Right.
we have these stickers and we have these machines that are put on our body that keep reading our blood sugar like at all points of time, so we know what our blood sugar fluctuation is like, how our body's functioning. So, coming back to my story, initially for the first week, I told my very close friends, which meant the entire school would know. So all my teachers and all my friends had found out. Most of my teachers thought I was making up stories and I was lying. So one of the teachers slapped me and told me like, why am I making up stuff and scaring the other students? And I said, I am not. Like it's the truth and it's the reality. And then I was asked to
Yeah.
produce reports and I did show it. And then one of my teachers made fun of me in front of all the students on a school trip. And it was quite
That's
disheartening, but then eventually we got along with it.
right. That's quite. I'm sorry that that happened, and I hope that it changes eventually. We have a question for you that asks, "How was the experience being a TEDx speaker?"
Um, Honestly, it's just like another talk. Okay. So TEDx is one of the most overhyped platforms that there are out there. Okay. In fact, you're limited to a certain audience when you're at TEDx. It's very curated, it's very constricted. Like, I
Yeah.
can't be myself the way I want to be. Also, it ain't paying my bills. It doesn't give me a penny. It's a great platform. I'm not denying that. But there's a lot of problems around it inherently. Like I realized it after my third talk. I was like, okay, so now I need to like reduce on the number of the frequency of TEDx's because there's a lot of rules and regulations around it. Of course, it's an unmatched feeling. People look up to you, etc., etc., etc. But all of this is validation.
Right.
There's nothing that comes from within that tells you after a certain point that hey, listen, it's like a TEDx. It's like a you've achieved so much, and you've done so
Yeah.
and so. It's not like a Forbes. It's not like an award that you won. Like
Right.
today, when I look at my book, that I've written the book, and then when I look at my TEDx certificate, I would weigh my book way above than my TEDx talks. Not that I am dissuading anyone to do one. I'm just saying that it's overhyped. People have just made the hype of TEDx's and talks like way up there. People need to really know that you need to uh, you need to just let your voice out there through any medium, and TEDx is just one of them. So unless your message is reaching the right people, you're doing the job well. So it's okay. It feels okay to be a TEDx speaker. It's just fine.
Speaking of your book, congratulations. I'm very proud of
Thank
you.
you.
Can you tell my listeners a little more about it?
I started my work journey as an entrepreneur at 15, around the same time as I had diabetes, with like teaching aunties how to bake and like cooking food for people and selling like cupcakes and macaroons and stuff like that. Um, so at that time, I had to sort of encompass and I had to bring together all my learnings because as someone who was very forgetful, I just thought I'll forget everything that I'm doing every day. So I just make a little journal note of like sold so and so for so and so much, cost is so much, sales price is so much, so profit should be this much. So that is how I learned how you make profit. Then I understood costing, then I understood fixed variable costs, then I understood procurement, uh, then I understood a lot of different factors of how a business is run. Okay. So then bringing in together different forms of businesses, working on different things. Over 7 years, I compiled something known as my journal. And then, of course,
Right.
I refined the language and did a lot of different things. So, which is how Journal of a Serial Entrepreneur came together. Across my experience at 5 startups and about 30, 40 brands that I've worked with. So that is how Journal of a Serial Entrepreneur came in. People have this misconception that the book's about my story. The book literally has nothing about me. It's about the learnings I've had, and it's not about how the 95% startups fail. It's about how the 5% startups succeed that nobody talks about.
Right.
So yeah.
So what was it? Must have been quite thrilling. As far as I remember, I think you launched it in your alma mater, which is Symbiosis School of Economics, right?
Yes. Actually, there was a pre-launch that happened. Like the official launch happened in Bombay.
Right. But you
We had
did something.
we had a book launch in Bombay where we had a lot of we had a lot of things that were going on in Bombay as a part of the activity because there was a whole book launch, uh, book book tour organized rather. So there was Bombay, there was Pune was Symbiosis, there was Delhi, and there was Gurgaon. There was Sonipat, Haryana. Then finally there was Dubai, and then in the end we were supposed to go to Chennai and Jaipur, but because of COVID-19, both Chennai and Jaipur had to be called off as a part of the tour. So Pune was one of them, and the alma mater was definitely like an important milestone of the process because that's where my official journey as an entrepreneur had begun. And I really am quite grateful to my friends I met at Symbiosis who pushed me and made sure that I was always out there. They would get me like things I would need just during the hour of it. Like if I bake for 30 hours straight, like I'm really tired,
Yeah.
they would know just the right thing to do to order food for me, to ensure that I've taken my medicines, to make sure that I go off to sleep. So these few friends who obviously weren't there that time because they're all across the world right now doing their own thing, they were one of the reasons I actually went back to my college to make that mark and be like, hey guys, this is for all of us. We started
Yeah,
here
it was
and
like
today is the
awesome.
book.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm sure, I'm sure it felt like full circle. What made you start a diabetic chef? You started this in Symbiosis, and what made you actually go towards this journey?
Uh, I've always been someone who likes to help people out. Like it's just inherently like someone who I am. So a diabetic chef is uh, something that came in as like a helping factor for people around me, especially like looking at my mother grow up with diabetes. Like when I was growing up, she's had diabetes since I was like 8 years old or 9 years old. Okay, so looking at her being restricted to not eat most things was difficult, or and so to say disheartening. So I just realized that it's not just her, but it's a bunch of people who are in that whole area of not being allowed to eat certain things, and it just broke me completely. So then I started writing down all the recipes I would make for myself that were successful on Facebook as a blog, and then it started reaching people, and I didn't know what to call it. So then I literally took the simplest term out there, a diabetic chef.
Yeah.
Like there was no two thoughts to it, which is how a diabetic chef became what it was. And then later I thought, should I change it? Should I not? And then people just said, just go on with it. And to become a brand, to reach larger audiences and everything it did.
I'm glad you finally did that. They say that, they say that you are what you eat. So what is something that you have learned along the way that has helped you or helped your customers? Or, for example, diabetics have, Tarla Dalal does a whole thing for diabetic cooking. So what's your take on that? Is there something that's helped worked for you personally that you would recommend to people for just better
Um,
health, not just diabetes?
so, honestly, the problem here is just simple. We don't have diabetic cookbooks that are authentic.
Hmm.
Uh, it's problematic because people call things sugar free, sugarless, healthy,
Yeah,
keto friendly,
that's just
ketogenic.
aspartame.
Okay, and there's so many layers to it that you just can't believe in any of those. Find me one book. Except, I mean, I know there are some Western books that are based on diabetic cooking and stuff like that. but they're not meant for Indian households. Are you getting what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
as someone who's accustomed to eating dal, chawal, roti, sabzi on an everyday basis, I can't have a quiche and I can't have a risotto and I can't have a pasta and I can't have pizzas every other day. Are
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? For dinner and for lunch and for like breakfast, I need to have my ragi dosa. I need to have my idli. I need to have my sandwich. I need to have things that I like to eat. And if I pick up like a westernized cookbook, which is like 1 out of 1,000 authentic books, the
Yeah.
identification factor is also very difficult
Right.
to get the right book. So my journey has been quite difficult because it's been a whole lot of trial and error. So every 100 times, literally 100 times, I would try a recipe. Once or twice it would be correct, like perfect,
Oh,
like a
wow.
plated food piece I would have in front of me and then I would eat it.
But yeah, props to your patience towards it. We have a question that asks whether you plan on coming up with a cookbook meant specifically for diabetics.
Um, I wouldn't want to officially comment on it,
Okay.
but something might be baking yet.
Oh, nice. So, what are the common health patterns that you've noticed in your customers throughout this journey of, dealing
Um,
with people with diabetics or with people with various other, like with cholesterol or hypertension?
um,
What are common patterns that you found with their health and their attitude towards their health?
to be honest, the most common factor, not just health wise, is they're shit scared. Like they're really scared, okay? Like whenever they come to you, they'll ask you 100,000 questions to have a piece of brownie and it's acceptable. It is completely acceptable because they haven't gotten that sort of food ever outside of
Yeah,
their houses and of that certain
yeah,
taste. And then this whole factor of believability comes in, like conviction, that are they
yeah,
convinced enough that what they're having is authentic or what they're going to buy from me is going to be fine for them. A common health trait would be uh, the whole problem. This tastes too real, if you know what
yeah,
I'm trying to say. Like diabetic friendly dessert can taste like a regular dessert because of whatever the recipe is and how things are, right? So people
yeah,
find it difficult to believe that it's a diabetic friendly or it's a healthy dessert. So that point
yeah.
just becomes like, तुम हमें उल्लू तो नहीं बना रहे हो ना?
Hmm.
If you know what I'm saying. And the
Yeah,
second part that comes in, uh, second part that would come in is, can someone who's non-diabetic in my house have this? Because when people
yeah,
come to buy desserts, they don't buy like 1 or 2 pieces. No, they buy like a lot of 6 or they buy 10 pieces or like they buy like a box of chocolates or however. Um, then they're worried about preservatives and they're worried about what is the shelf life because if they take it home, how long can be refrigerated? Have you added any extra preservatives to it? Have you added any chemical stuff to it? Does it have aspartame? Does it have like different stuff? And
yeah,
this whole thing becomes like very uh, holistic. So you have to be very sure of what you're selling. So in
yeah,
my case, it's simpler said than done because I am a diabetic. And for proof purposes and proof of concept, I can eat something in front of you and tell you that, hey, listen, I'm eating it. You can eat it too. It's fine.
yeah, hmm,
Because we have a shared poison,
yeah,
which we're prohibited. So if I'm going to have the Adam's apple, like you're supposed to eat it too, and then both of us will be affected in the same way. So technically, yeah. And as an Indian audience that I've catered to, it's mostly a very scared audience. We can't do
right,
much about it, and you can't possibly do much than just be humble, be nice to them, and make sure that they understand what you're selling. Because this is not a market of um, apples.
yeah,
This is really like one of those markets, like probably a market of diamonds. It sounds very bizarre, but you have to have the right curated pieces explained in the best way to be sold, although the ticket value might not be that high. But the kind of audiences that are consuming are vulnerable, they're scared. So, which is why with Diabetic Chef, you are dealing with a very sensitive audience, and you have to be very careful with the kind of positioning you're having and with the kind of um, explanation and descriptions you have for your products. So, yeah.
But I think it's going to take some time for people to, realize that just because it's diabetic friendly doesn't mean that you can't have it. Or what do you think that food is made of? I don't understand that. It's quite interesting how people react to it in that situation.
So people have said it like out and out loud. अरे ये तो sugar free है मैं क्यों खाऊंगा?
Huh.
They're like ये तो diabetes वालों के लिए है मुझे diabetes नहीं है.
Yeah.
And you know what's the worst thing I've ever heard?
What?
इसको खा के मुझे diabetes तो नहीं हो जाएगा ना? I'm not joking. I'm not even kidding.
So sorry. I'm so sorry.
And I'm just like, bro, first of all, I am diabetic. I don't see the problem in this situation where I am making something for another diabetic and you're eating it and asking me if you're threatened by getting diabetes. Like, kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean, but I feel like I'm noticing certain patterns in the people around me, or stuff that they're putting up online, at least from whatever I can tell. And through the pandemic, while we're ensuring that we're washing our hands for like 20 seconds every time and whatnot, but then there's another growing, section of society, or of people, actually people from our generation, who aren't paying attention to other health concerns as much in comparison. For example, they're not paying attention to, say, UTIs or PCOS or diabetes or cholesterol or hypertension. So, how do you think we as a collective can actually change that?
So it's a very interesting series of uh, events that we've been surrounded with, the whole pandemic and staying at home. And it all
Yeah.
boils down to hygiene. It's a
Right.
mental, dental, oral, food hygiene, and just how you keep yourself in general. Okay. So I was working with this gynecologist and very great lady, very great doctor. I used to research a lot of material for her on-ground events, and for her drives that she would conduct, distribution of menstruation cups, uh,
Yeah.
her sanitary napkins, explaining how tampons work, etc., in schools and colleges around Mahim. So, doctor and I used to always discuss what are the things that are involved. Uh, the biggest problem, rather, the biggest challenge with having a PCOS, formerly known as PCOD, is the stigma
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah.
Like, the first thing a mother would ask her daughter, instead of sitting her down and explaining it to her, is asking the doctor, क्या मेरी बेटी को बच्चा हो सकता है कि नहीं?
Yeah. I mean,
You know what I'm trying to
it
say?
does.
Like, it doesn't work like that. So doctor and I, we used to speak about it all the time. So PCOS is one condition that is controllable by weight loss. It's a condition that can
Yes.
be controlled with
By diet.
by
Exercise.
dieting. Exactly. Your controlled carbs intake. So PCOS inherently evolves with diabetes and thyroid. Okay. Which is why you either
Yeah.
gain weight, you lose weight, and then your blood sugar levels fluctuate quite a lot. Uh, a lot of
But
people contract.
I'm so
Sorry.
sorry to cut you off out there, but I got diagnosed with PCOS when I was pretty young. And my doctor first, they put me on the Plan A pill, and I just did not like the idea of having that, because I know it's changing my body, and I just didn't, I wasn't up for that idea. And then eventually I met another doctor who told me that just control your diet and watch what you eat and just exercise, and it'll be fine. So there was like a couple of years in the middle I was absolutely okay, but then I think last year onwards it just started getting so bad because the cysts returned. Because in some cases the cysts come up during the menstrual
Yeah.
cycle, and in some
Yeah.
cases they're always there.
Yeah.
So for me they show up only during my menstrual cycle. And but it has nothing to do with for me, thyroid has been normal, my sugar's been normal, even though I have a high risk with both sides in my family. It's still been pretty normal.
So this whole idea of uh, UTIs and PCOS and a lot of these conditions have a lot to do with stress. It's a lot to do with your um, oral hygiene. It's a lot to do with your genitalia. It's a lot to do how you keep yourself clean. It's your cleanliness is not just the amount of face wash that you have used on your face or how much you shampoo your hair. It's also about the rest of you. You should be very careful with signals when, uh, and it's very normal to have these kind of things when you're growing up in your 20s. Like, doctor and I have spoken so much about this weird stench that we all like sometimes just have, like this whole smell that comes around. Or we have our own issues. People, boys especially, don't end up with basic hygiene of like cleaning themselves up,
Yeah.
and it's problematic because it can cause any and every problem in the short run and the long run. And these are very developing issues. Like with diabetes, you're very highly prone to UTIs.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, which is why when we get a urine tested, like, so there's a blood sugar, there's a PP, and there's a urine test. So, the urine
Yeah.
test is done to find particles in your urinary substances. So, they check for bacteria, they check for viruses, they check for cysts, they check for bumps, and like different stuff, particles basically in your urine, which shows that if your urine is clean or not. Also, if there's sugar present in your urine or not. So there are a lot of factors that come in that we don't realize on a very conscious level, which we should start taking care of, which includes all of this. So one message to everyone would be like, just watch what you eat. Eat whatever you want, but just watch it. Like be conscious about it. Like I know of late in the last week, I have binged a lot of sweet stuff, and it's lethal for me. Like it's too bad for me. I can feel the pain around my hand, my joints,
Yeah.
my eyes hurt here. Like I have the pain all around it, but I know that I will stop. And when I stop, it will go away, but it's not healthy. So I won't be just a preacher. We all have our times. We all have our stress balls that we need to bust. We need to get out of it. But there has to be a certain amount of control, and you got to take care of yourself.
Right. I agree. I agree with you on that. There was this report that was done by Moody's Analytics, which was about the economic consequences of millennial health. So, I mean, this was conducted in the US, obviously, but I will come to India. It states that there's been a sharp increase of chronic conditions like hypertension, high cholesterol, hyperactivity, and major depression in 2017 in comparison to 2014, right? Now, coming to India, there was a study that said that more than 50% of India does not have access to adequate mental health care along with physical.
Yeah.
So, like you said about how the rural and the urban
Yeah.
population, it's such a stark imbalance. So, when we're talking about affordability of being able to go there, the stigma of, okay, I'm going and getting some help for my stress or for my anxiety towards work, or keeping that in control, but so many people don't have access to it.
And
And if
even
it,
people like us with privilege who have access, I'm sorry, have been told कि ये तो तुम्हारे दिमाग में है.
yeah,
Like it's just in your
that is,
head. It's not a real thing.
I don't get it. I really don't get it.
I have been visiting a psychiatrist for the last 2 years for multiple reasons. I have an appointment with her like soon again. And
Yeah.
every time I would talk to her, my parents would be like, सिर्फ तुम्हारे दिमाग में है. अरे literally दिमाग में ही है boss. Like it is the problem with the head, which is why I'm going to her. It's not imaginary. It's not controllable factors. If I could control things of my body, I would have controlled my diabetes and started becoming more. I would have increased my metabolism. I would have, like grown a beard faster. I would have done so many things if it was in my head.
Yeah, and I feel like it's probably also, I think while going to a psychiatrist helps some people, for some people it's different. They can just talk to a psychologist, or they can just go and
Psychologist, therapy, yeah, yeah.
or they can go into different forms of therapy instead of medication. But whatever it is, I feel like there's also a set of us who are in a state of denial that everything is fine. even though you can clearly tell, even though you know that it's not, but you're just telling yourself that while that can help, I feel like in the long run it may not. Of being able to actually make that phone call to a doctor, and I feel like that's also why, because of that kind of with such a low demand in that sense, the fees are so high. It's not covered by your insurance, so why would someone spend so much money to go to talk to another person?
I'll explain to you how this is detrimental, okay? In a very short
Yeah.
analogy. XYZ person catches like a fever, and the fever is between 100 to 102. So according to the mother, a paracetamol would help. So she would give him more crocin. She would give him more crocin. The person develops a cough congestion. So there'll be a decold total given to the person. Ki haan, haldi ka doodh pee lo. Then the person starts having chronic headaches. Then another crocin goes in after 6 hours. Because there's this whole setup of doctors within your household.
Yeah.
Okay. Nuske, ghar ke nuske. But people don't realize that there's a reason why this buddy has practiced for 10 years, studied for 5-8 years, done the MBBS MD to treat you. And just when things are really bad and blowing out of proportion, Arey, doctor ke chalo, hospital chalo. You could have simply called the doctor out when the problem started. So people
Yeah.
here don't tackle symptoms, they tackle diseases.
Yeah.
So when problems are building up, everyone wants to heal it themselves. They're like, okay, I'll probably listen to some music, or I'll just read some book and I'll just get away with it. If you're having a panic attack, it's an attack. It's a medical condition. It's not something that is very freely controllable by XYZ people. You have to seek medical help when required. When physical symptoms don't show, people don't understand. And God forbid, when it does happen to people, I know the best how bad it can get. Like, we've spoken about it, how things can get for a lot of us. So, just having a psychologist is a very normal practice. Like, I don't know if you know this, I'm pretty sure you might have read it somewhere, but every psychiatrist and psychologist has another psychiatrist and psychologist.
Yeah. It's necessary.
Yeah. Because of the kind of like build up that you have in your head. So
Yeah.
as
The
you
kind of
give
environment.
yeah. So as you give school exams, give mental health exams as well.
Yeah, it's important, I feel like, for a lot of people.
Yep.
And I right before the first, I think, this live stream, I asked my mom what she thought about millennial health, and she just looks at me straight with a dead face, and she goes like, "It's a disaster waiting to happen." And I realize how true that is to such an extent. And it was not. What do you think we can do and start? It can't. I'm not just talking about eating or lifestyle. What are the little changes that we can make? And what are the changes you have made, for example, to reduce the amount of stress you have, or work on to take care of yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally?
You need to cut off people from your life, and
Yeah, I'm doing that.
you need to block out people. You need
Done.
to uh, you need to understand that certain people are not meant to be around you, and some people are toxic for you. So the first step is to not let these people affect you, to not let people around you who cause you damage to your mental health affect you. So it's very important to cut them off. Second is ignorance. Like, you have to start ignoring certain things. I'm not saying start ignoring like problems. I'm saying start ignoring um, like people, because when you start giving them so much power over you, they start affecting you more. So factors, people, or things that start affecting you, they leech onto you. You need to let go of them.
Yeah.
And the best time to do the same is uh, when you are about to get more vulnerable towards these situations. Second is sometimes it's okay to not retaliate. Like, always having a reaction is not the best thing to do. So just smile and walk away. Like, the whole Madagascar smile and wave. Just
Yeah.
smile and wave. Just be like, okay, ha ha ha, okay, bye. The next thing would be know your triggers. like may it be physical health or mental health, just start introspecting and identifying what your triggers are, because these will actually help you averse and divert yourself before anything is about to happen. Like if you know coffee is bad for you, don't have coffee. Like if you know talking about toxic relationships can affect you, don't talk about them.
Right.
If you're not comfortable with certain things, don't do them. So these are small steps that you start taking, that I have personally taken, to just make it better and communicate. Because if you don't communicate, people won't understand what you're going through physically, mentally, in terms of your health and otherwise.
Yeah, we're not mind readers. I tell that to people. You have to tell me what is going wrong, or if you want
Yep.
something, or you want to do something. I can't
Or
read
you,
your mind.
or you ask a wonderful friend to make you a playlist, and then she does it for you. He does it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you listened to it?
Last night I slept through to it. Like I was listening to it and I slept off.
Good. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Okay, so I think this brings us to the end of our conversation. So I hope you have a great day. I hope
You
stay
too.
healthy. I
Yes.
hope this helps any person listening who will be alive by the time we reach 2050, because you should listen to what I said earlier, to pay some attention and just take care of yourself and those around you, because unless you take care of yourself, you can't take care of anything around
Anyone
you.
else.
It is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
going to happen. But thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This was so much fun. I learned so much from you,
Yay.
so I'm very excited with this new challenge.
Please.
But
We'll talk
yes,
soon.
thank you so much. Let's
Bye
do it.
bye.
Bye bye. Okay, so that was Harsh Kedia, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation about the importance of taking your health seriously and why it is necessary. And yeah, if you like this, please share it with your friends. If you think it can be better, message me, tell me how it can be better, what I can do better. If you think there's someone I should be bringing on to this session, let me know. I'll try to make that happen. And this is Stories with Shastri. Bye.